and welcome to Angie's Tasty Tuesday. I'm Angie and I'm here every Tuesday at 11 o'clock to bring you a new and delicious whole food plant-based recipe that you can incorporate into your family's weekly menu. Today's recipe has been requested for almost a year now by my videographer, Izabell, and she has wanted a healthy ramen noodle soup. And it's hard to come up with one because there are normally so much sodium in ramen noodles. But I was able to come around with a fairly low sodium recipe when you compare it to the normal one that you can put together in no time at all at your house and enjoy that same rich, delicious ramen noodles that everybody enjoys. So let's get started. Already prepared 3 bricks of ramen noodles, and I use the millet and brown rice ramen noodles by Lotus Foods, and they come in these really nice little bricks. You boil your water, drop it in, wait for about a minute, pull it apart with a fork, let it cook for 2 to 3 additional minutes, and then you strain them and put some cold water on them, and you set them aside to make your soup. So that's what I have already prepared, my noodles. The next thing you're going to do is take the chickenless noodle soup powder spice mix from episode 55, and we're starting with 2 tablespoons of that powder mixed with 1 cup of very hot unsalted vegetable stock. We're going to mix this together, and I have cut up a 14-ounce block of pressed and drained firm tofu, and I've cut it into about 1/2 inch little cubes, and we're going to put that in here to marinate while we get the rest of the soup cooking. Tofu is very good at picking up flavors, and so when you marinate it ahead of time, it will give that extra flavor, that chicken flavor, to your ramen noodle soup. So we're going to set this after we've stirred it up really good, set this aside and let it marinate while we get to the rest of our soup. Start off at the stove today on a medium to medium-high heat to saute our vegetables. I'm adding about 1/4 cup of the unsalted vegetable stock to the bottom of my soup pot. I'm going to let it get really hot, and I'm going to start sauteing some of my ingredients. I have 1 minced shallot. I'm going to wait until that starts to sizzle a bit before I add the other ingredients. Once that starts to sizzle, give it just a second, starting to see a little bit of movement in my pan, I'm going to add a tablespoon of minced garlic, a tablespoon of fresh minced ginger, and we're going to let that simmer, or saute I should say, for about 2 minutes. Just to get it nice and golden or translucent. Now I'm going to add 1 cup, and I took the matchstick carrots and I chopped them up finer because one of the traditional types of ramen noodles is that the vegetables are chopped very, very small. And I'm putting the cup of chopped matchstick carrots in there, and I'm going to just keep sauteing. To that, I'm going to add about 1/2 cup of minced celery. And again, we just want to keep this on a really nice medium to high so that it continues to simmer or saute. Once this gets nice and hot again, I'm going to add 4 to 5 very thinly sliced and chopped shiitake and oyster combination mushrooms to the mix, and we're going to saute this until the mushrooms lose their liquid. You won't need to add any more vegetable stock because the mushrooms will release enough liquid to keep them from sticking on the bottom. You can see that's starting to be a beautiful base for our soup. This is going to take about 3 to 5 minutes. Now that our mushrooms have lost all of their moisture and everything is sauteed down, we're going to continue adding our ingredients. I have 1 cup, about 1 cup. It was 4 medium-sized red carrots. These add beautiful color to your ramen noodles. And I have 3 scallions, chopped up, green onions, whites and greens. I have about 1/4 of a cup of just sliced celery to give it a little bit more texture. And I have 1 cup of frozen peas. Now you can also use snow pea pods, which are really, really pretty. I didn't happen to have any of those today, so I'm just putting in regular peas. And we're going to give this a good stir. Then we're going to add 1 tablespoon of white rice vinegar, a tablespoon of white miso paste, 2 tablespoons of light tamari. And you want to make sure it's light because we want to keep that sodium as low as possible. Add 1 tablespoon of maple syrup, about 1/4 of a teaspoon of black pepper, and 1 large tablespoon of blonde sesame seeds. To that, we're going to add another 4 cups of vegetable stock. So this takes 5 cups of stock altogether. You can add more if you like a more brothier noodles. But once you put the noodles in, they will absorb most of the vegetable stock. It's going to look like a lot, but the noodles really do soak up a lot of the broth. So we're putting all of this in. We're going to give it a good mix to make sure that miso paste gets nice and dissolved into our broth. I know it looks like a lot of broth, but trust me, those noodles really, even though they're pre-cooked, they really soak up the broth. They are just like little sponges. So we're going to put the heat down just a little bit to about medium. We want it to simmer because we want to really cook those carrot and celery pieces. So we're going to simmer for about 10 minutes and we'll be right back. Now that our soup has simmered for about 10 minutes or so, what you want to do is test one of your little pieces of carrot and celery, make sure it's tender. We're going to take that marinated tofu and we're going to add it to the mixture. You don't want to add it beforehand because your tofu will crumble and fall apart if it boils too hard. So if you just add the marinated tofu right at the end, right before, it actually turns out a lot better. So we're going to stir that in. Just let it blend together for a couple of minutes. And now to serve this, you have 2 options. You can either keep the noodles separate, put them in the bowl, and ladle the sauce over the top, the soup over the top, or you can combine the noodles in with the sauce. But realize if you do that, it will soak up the majority of the sauce and you will have just really yummy flavored noodles, but you won't have a lot of broth. So it's personal preference as to whether you prefer more broth or less broth in your ramen noodles. But either way, it is delicious. So we'll be right back with it plated. So for today's meaningful meetups, I'd like to get some information from you guys. We're going to put a link to a very, very short survey below. I was thinking about doing weekly live videos where you can send in your questions ahead of time or go live with me and do a Q&A so that we can get to know each other a little better, a little more personal, not necessarily a cooking demonstration, but maybe some of your struggles, some of your frustrations, some of your successes that we can share with each other and what's made it possible for you to stick with a whole food plant-based lifestyle or what you're struggling with in order to stick with it. Let us know what day and what time works best for you. Even though it's a live, it'll be accessible later, but only during the live portion can you actually submit your comments or your questions if you don't put them in ahead of time. What I'll do the first 3 minutes of each live session is take those questions people have put in the survey and talk about the answers to those questions while we wait for everybody to jump on. So let us know what you think, because remember, community is strong together, and alone it's so hard to do anything. So make sure you're having those meaningful meetups that help support you on your path towards wellness and longevity. Here we have our finished ramen noodle soup with a few little pieces of organic nori put in for our finishing touch. I hope your family enjoys this recipe as much as mine does. It stores great in the refrigerator for 4 or 5 days, but if you do store the noodles with the broth, it will soak up the majority of that broth. Still delicious. If you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. That really helps us out. And remember, you can find more videos like this here and here. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss out on any of these delicious recipes. And until next time, remember, plants are the best medicine.